Good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Perez-Krantz. I work in the Office of Pre-Professional Health Careers at Texas Tech University. And this is the first of our new series of sessions. We're calling it the Pre-Health Checkup. And really the goal of it is for our students to learn something new, learn new ways of thinking, learn new ways of doing. And so we are also matching it to our advising philosophy. We have the elements of competitive and compelling, and we will soon be rolling out more information about those elements. But if you've ever gone and sat in one of our welcome sessions during orientation, we talk about how our pre-health students can essentially take it into their own hands to be a competitive and compelling applicant by increasing their knowledge in certain areas. And so our first session is going to be on Problem Solving 101. And so that's what we're doing today. And also, I want to start it off by just saying, we are really excited to work with all of our students on the campus. And if you have never come to any of our pre-professional health careers advising, hopefully this will also encourage you to seek out some help with our office and connect with us. But first off, I want to kind of introduce this process of problem solving. Every year, hundreds and hundreds of students come into Texas Tech University and they are pursuing a singular goal. They want to be a nurse or a physician, a dentist, a physical therapist, occupational therapists, you name it, some field related to the healthcare industry. And so we were really excited to work with them. However, once they come in and they have these really lofty goals, it's sometimes a bit of a shock when they learn that they have to do so many things to prepare themselves. And so, we talk with them in our office about the courses they need challenging courses, they need to meet lots of requirements for their professional schools. They have to try to increase their network so that they can get out there and meet new people. We also suggest that they take part in campus activities, so getting into some student organizations, taking on community service, also trying to pursue some area of their field, so maybe some shadowing, or getting a professional credential related to it, like their certified nurse assistant. And so there's a lot that is thrown into the mix, and I think that it's very overwhelming for our students. They often experience what can be called a analysis paralysis, where they are just feeling so overwhelmed. And so that's what this session is about today. I have a very special guest who's sitting next to me, Dr. Logan Winkelman, and she is the program director for the Master of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling program at the Texas Tech Health Sciences Center. So we are so excited to have her here. A little bit about Dr. Winkelman. She is a licensed professional counselor in the state of Texas and has worked in higher education for the past 7+ years, specializing in career counseling and professional development. She has dedicated her time to researching marketplace trends in diversity recruiting practices and counseling domestic and international populations, as well as assisting individuals in finding employment and advancing their careers in a global economy. Her other research interests include access to mental health and wellness resources, emotional intelligence, biofeedback, and aging and longevity. So welcome, Dr. Winkelman. It's exciting to have you here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Wonderful. So I have also just, in the spirit of getting us started, prepared some questions. So hopefully we can delve into a little bit about problem solving and get your opinion from a professional standpoint, but also just what we can be doing if we have so many things on our plates and how to solve those problems. So my first question, Dr. Winkelman, many of our students are out on their own for the first time in their lives, and as problems arise, feel unable to act and or don't know what to do. How can they start to approach a problem on a basic level?
Yes, well, again, thank you so much. I'm sharing my screen now because I want to kind of walk through this process with you all. So again, I'm excited to be here. I often say that the hardest times in life are times of transition. During times of transition, for example, coming to college and being on your own for the first time, like you mentioned, can be overwhelming. You're faced with new challenges and you likely feel ill-prepared to solve those problems. And while you'll likely feel ill-prepared for nearly every transition in your life, the good news is that you can learn some basic problem-solving techniques to make the challenges you experience more manageable. So the first thing to remember is that you are not alone. Today, many individuals report being under increased levels of stress. Life is filled with change and uncertainty. And chances are you're experiencing what you're experiencing right now. Someone else is or has experienced that also. This is what we call normalizing the problem. Once we realize something is common for us to experience, we often adopt a more neutral or even positive outlook on that specific something. So once our perspective changes from neutral or even to positive, we often empower ourselves to look at the same problem as solvable. So that's the first thing that I want to kind of talk about. The next is actually a process for problem solving. So like any skill, you must practice, and the more you practice, the more effective you'll be. So the first step in this process is identify the problem. So before we can take action, we must understand the scope of the problem. So you want to take time to truly think about the issue at hand. You can think, or you can start by asking yourself some of the following questions. So what is actually happening? Really kind of take an assessment of what's happening and take in as much information regarding that problem. The next is there an identifiable pattern to the issue, such as where and when it's occurring? And then next, how do you feel about it? Truly, how do we feel about it? Keep in mind, not all problems are solvable. So consider if this particular concern is within your sphere of influence, and if it's worth your energy you'll put forth in trying to solve it. If not, consider ways of coping with the issue at hand more effectively rather than solving the problem. So step 2 is brainstorm possible solutions. So now that you've defined the problem, you can begin to think about possible solutions. Think of ways you might approach solving the problem and try not to judge whether one solution is better than the other. Another tip is to consider thinking of a time that you were successful in solving a similar problem. This could actually help boost your confidence because you've dealt with a similar problem. Could a similar solution work for this problem too? You can also seek guidance from trusted peers and mentors during this phase. Remember back to that first technique is you're not alone, and chances are what you're experiencing, someone near you might have also experienced the same issue. If you're having trouble coming up with possible solutions, your problem may be too complex. So consider breaking it down into more manageable, smaller parts that you can tackle more easily. So step 3 of this process is actually selecting the solution. So once we have a list of possible solutions, you want to try to analyze which one has the most potential. So during this phase, you can ask yourself, do I realistically think this will solve the problem? How will this solution make me feel afterwards? What are the positive and negative consequences of this solution? Keep in mind that there is rarely a perfect solution to any problem. So adopting the mindset that your solution may need adjusting as you move forward will help you stay resilient and adaptable as you move to the next step. And the next step is probably the hardest step, unfortunately. Many of us get stuck in the brainstorming or selecting a solution phase. Where many people struggle is actually putting it into action. One of my favorite quotes is from Nelson Mandela, and he stated, "I never lose, I either win or learn." And this type of mentality is helpful when putting any type of plan into action. Fear of failure really prevents many of us from taking action. If you reframe your perspective of failure to learning rather than failing, it normalizes the process and makes taking the next step less anxiety provoking. Now, again, that anxiety is still going to be there, but you know it's going to be there, and you're telling yourself, I'm going to act in spite of it. And this brings us to our last step. So the last is reflecting on your experience. So in order to learn the absolute most we possibly can from any type of experience, we must take time to reflect on that. This is probably where we don't have as much practice, because so often we're going through life kind of on autopilot, and we don't stay cognizant of our thoughts and feelings throughout our life, let alone our problem solving. So the things that you could possibly ask yourself once you've kind of implemented your action plan is, did your solution solve the problem? If not, what did you learn? Not necessarily what went wrong. The next question you could ask is, what issues remain unresolved? And what could you do differently next time? So again, you want to avoid casting judgment on yourself, because while you might think judgment is beneficial, it actually stifles your confidence. And so really, problem solving and decision making come down to confidence and commitment. And so we want to try to boost that whenever possible. So as I mentioned, problem solving is a skill, and most of us solve thousands of problems subconsciously every day. So bringing your awareness to your daily successes can often boost your confidence to take on even more complicated problems in the future.
Thank you so much, Dr. Winkelman. That was really, really helpful. I mean, I'm actually looking at this and reflecting on the part about the action. So I feel like that really is one of the most difficult periods for a student and it was for me, even as a professional. Once I've realized that I'm doing something, I realize, like, I just always throw myself in, feeling a little bit like jumping into a pool, and I'm just going to swim and go with it. I feel like that's something I, even as a professional now in a workforce, feel that I do is, if I'm a little nervous about taking an action, I do kind of steel myself up and, psych myself up a little bit, but then just doing it.
Yep.
I think just
Absolutely
is part of it. And I do encourage our students, I feel like that is the fear of the failure kicking in. We have very, very high reaching students. And so I always suggest just kind of put one foot in front of the other, just kind of take those steps, start doing it. It's never as bad as you think it's going to be. So yeah, I really love this. This is amazing. I do have another question, so we can maybe pop into that. Right now with the coronavirus pandemic, many of us are experiencing feelings of fear or uncertainty to act on certain problems or problems in general. We feel a little bit locked up. What can you recommend for students starting to overcome their fears in the time of a pandemic?
Amy, you're so right. These are incredibly challenging times, and many of us are experiencing things that we never thought in our lifetime we would experience. So this pandemic has brought to light many things, and many of which are really anxiety provoking. Uncertainty is not something most of us handle well. In fact, we are biologically designed to stay in homeostasis. So change and uncertainty, we're supposed to react negatively to. But one of my favorite topics to discuss during times of uncertainty is locus of control. So locus of control is a concept that refers to how strongly people believe they have control over situations and experiences that affect their lives. Certainly right now, we do not have control over this pandemic or even the weather. In fact, today, campus is closed because of the weather. So there are things that are outside of our control. But the premise of locus of control is shifting your locus from external to internal. And what I mean by this is when someone has an internal locus of control, they generally believe that their successes or failures is a result of their efforts and actions. Individuals with an external locus of control generally believe that their efforts and experiences are a result of external factors beyond their control, such as luck, fate, or circumstance. It's important to note that each person does have external factors that are truly out of their control. But the key here and the key takeaway is perception. When a person believes that their life is dictated by factors outside of their control, they're more likely to adopt what's called learned helplessness, where they act as if they are helpless even when they have control over their situation or power to change their circumstance or outcome. The opposite of this mindset is adopting a growth mindset. So the concept of a growth mindset was developed by psychologist Carol Dweck, and I actually have a picture of her book on the screen. And the growth mindset, she posits that our belief system about our abilities and our potential fuel our behavior and actually predict our success. So a growth mindset actually thrives on challenges and sees failure not as evidence of unintelligence or incompetence, but it's a springboard for growth, for kind of stretching our existing abilities. So if you haven't read this book by Carol Dweck called Mindset, I highly recommend it. Many schools are actually developing some of their techniques based off of this particular research, and so I highly recommend it. It allows us to essentially see ourselves as directors rather than actors in our life.
Okay. Wow, this is amazing. I think that this will be really helpful. I can imagine, not taking any kind of, knockdown, failure, potential here and there as personal to yourself is really important. I think, our students are struggling, and I think saying exactly that, I'm going to do the best I can within the pandemic to get some opportunities for myself. And definitely, even if it's not in your ideal setting, it's going to be in a setting that you can still make a big difference. So I would welcome students to kind of think that way. I love this idea. So thank you for presenting that. I think that also if students have a little bit of time, it would be great to review that book sometime coming up. Maybe you could take a picture of the screen. Well, good. This is so amazing. I do have some more thoughts and questions. Lastly, some of our students are very overwhelmed, and they also start to experience that analysis paralysis where perhaps just unsure of making any kind of difference, any changes due to fear and or feeling overwhelmed, maybe with everything they have on their plates. Do you have any tips for that?
Yes, Amy, analysis paralysis is a reality for many individuals. As I mentioned in my first slide, taking action is the hardest part for almost everybody. I even sometimes experience analysis paralysis when I'm at the grocery store because there's so many options I cannot choose which peanut butter to choose. But today we're inundated with so many options. It's really endless. The information and access to information often leaves us feeling fearful of making the wrong decision, which then turns to leading us to believe that we're not going to make a decision at all because we can never have enough information. So this often fills us with anxiety and indecision and ultimately dissatisfaction. In fact, research indicates that overthinking can actually lower your performance on mentally demanding tasks. It stifles your creativity and it drastically diminishes your willpower and motivation over time. But luckily, there are some techniques that you can employ to assist you with overcoming analysis paralysis. So the first one, which is one of my favorite kind of quotes, is remember that not all decisions are created equal. Because our ability to make quality long-term decisions deteriorates with each additional choice we make, big or small, you might try to cut down on the amount of decisions you need to make. Therefore, tackle the most important task the first thing in the morning when your willpower reserves are at their fullest. And then try to make small decisions as automated as possible. So turn small decisions into automatic habits, like picking out what you want to wear in the morning or choosing what you want for lunch. The more you can automate those small kind of decisions and turn those into habits, the more energy and effort you will have to put towards the big decisions. And so while that might seem kind of minuscule in the grand scheme of things, I don't think picking out what I want to wear, what I want for lunch will actually help me in decision making. It actually helps you not get decision fatigue, which is huge, because unlike a skill, our decision making is actually, think of it like a battery. So the more we use it, the more we kind of diminish it, and then we reset the next day. And so we want to make sure that the decisions we're exerting effort on truly matter. So when I'm at the grocery store and I'm contemplating what to choose, I have to think, is this really worth my time in contemplating this? Is it worth the stress I'm putting in to figure out if I'm going to like it? Just put forth that action and go with it. Mm-hmm. So the next is consider limiting the amount of information you consume. And I know this sounds like an impossible task, but as I mentioned, we live in a world where information is limitless. So really, it's impossible for us to consume everything, so we might as well set limits to the amount of information we consume. So this could simply be limiting the amount of sites you visit for news or for research, or determining the amount of time you'll spend researching something. So sometimes the time frame can be a little bit easier than the sites, because you might have to visit another site in order to get the answer that you're looking for. But if I tell myself, I'm going to give myself 30 minutes to look at this, and whatever I find in that 30 minutes is what I'm going to use. And sometimes that can be incredibly helpful and make it less overwhelming, because you know that you're just going to spend this amount of time researching something. So the next is kind of similar. So set a deadline and hold yourself accountable. So self-imposed deadlines, similar to self-imposed diets, are often the hardest to follow. We often don't hold ourselves very accountable. So a tip here is to share your deadline with a friend and ask for help in holding you accountable. Often when we incorporate support from others, we're more likely to carry out whatever task we're involved in. And so the next tip is similar to the previous in that it involves other people. So get out of your own head and talk it out with someone else. This has multiple benefits. So having to present your thoughts to someone else forces you to kind of synthesize your information that you've collected so far in a clear, concise way, or at least clearer and more concise than it was bouncing around in your head. Mm-hmm. So in addition to having kind of in addition to kind of synthesizing it, we also can get outward validation of our ideas from someone else that we respect. And in turn, this can give us the boost of confidence that we need to take action. So if you've ever been, my husband does this for me all the time. So I'm someone who's incredibly frugal, and I'll never buy anything. I'll sit there, I'll go to the store 5 times. I'm like, I really don't need it. I'll put it away. And my husband will just say, just do it. Just do it. It's what you want. You've come back several times. And that little boost kind of gives me the validation that I need, that I'm like, okay, I'll get it this time. And I usually am very happy with that purchase. But again, I'm also plagued with kind of analysis paralysis, because I'll go back and forth. Do I really need it? Do I really want it? So sometimes getting other people's help that really truly care for you and support you is beneficial. So one of the last things is what we've talked about this whole time, is take action, even when you don't feel 100% ready. So you can spend countless hours just collecting and analyzing more and more information. And it's tempting because it tricks ourselves into thinking we're actually making progress. But in the end, the action is what decides our ultimate success or failure. It's not the research we put in. So when you're the next time you're kind of stuck in this analysis mode, consider taking action before you feel ready, and then just figure out the rest on the way throughout that decision. And it will feel uncomfortable, but the more and more you do it, the more kind of you lean into that uncomfortability, these decisions will seem less overwhelming. Have you ever heard of the term perception is reality? Mm-hmm. So it's more true than we care to believe, because we have a built-in confirmation bias. All of us do. And we will most always seek to confirm every decision we make. So if you've ever got something new, like a new laptop or even a new vehicle, and then you see that laptop everywhere, you see that vehicle everywhere, that's your internal confirmation bias actually confirming the thoughts that you've had. So that laptop or that car was driving around long before you had made that decision, but because our confirmation bias is so ingrained, everybody experiences this. So what I say is use this biological process to your advantage. It's often your confidence in and your commitment to the decisions that determine if they're right or wrong in the end. So consider which option you will be more motivated to make succeed. And this will often be the best decision because you predetermined its success. And I know that seems silly, but essentially when you make a decision, you're choosing that will be successful. And that sometimes can give us the boost of confidence that we need to continue to make challenging decisions and take action.
I love this. I love it so much. And it's true. I do think that I find it's very helpful to talk through things with a friend or family member if I'm trying to really weigh some options. And I also feel like doing a little bit more research for yourself. I know that our students, this younger generation, loves to do online research. And I think that won't be such an issue. I think it's more like limiting the intake of how many parameters, how many things you've researched. So I like the recommendation for that. Also, when I'm weighing whether to do a decision, I found this quote helpful. It was, if it's going to matter in 5 years, if it's not going to matter in 5 years, spend 5 minutes on it, And so for those little life things, do I go out with my friend? Do I stay in? Obviously you do have to make decisions, but I think that if it's not going to be something super urgent, kind of start achieving those things, knocking things off your list so that you can get to the meat of what you need to do. Also, I've taken some time management courses before, and they said, if it's going to take 5 minutes, go ahead and do it. Otherwise, try to prioritize, what are the more important things going on. And so I think hopefully this is going to be really helpful for our students. Thank you. And then also just we did poll our students to find out before this session, what is a specific struggle that they have experienced that we could kind of pose to you in this session? And one that came up is the idea of imposter syndrome, where our students may feel doubt in their skills or have a fear of being exposed kind of as a fraud, the path towards going towards a healthcare profession is fraught with a lot of stress. Can you please talk about how students should frame their mindset if they have this imposter syndrome that they're suffering with?
So I love this topic, and it's going to sound a little weird, but I'll explain. So just as I mentioned earlier, normalizing is important, especially when it comes to experiencing imposter syndrome. So it's estimated that over 70% of people experience imposter feelings at some point in their life, 70%. So imposter syndrome can be associated with many negative attributes, but I hold a different perception of it, a more kind of positive outlook. So some research states that individuals who experience imposter syndrome may exhibit behaviors related to perfectionism. So another way of stating this is that they set very high expectations for themselves, and any small mistake makes them question their competence. So personally, if 70% of people experience imposter syndrome, then I take comfort in knowing that I'm not alone in feeling that way. I believe that it is very, very likely that in some point in your life, you will feel like you have no idea what you're doing and that you don't belong at some point in your life or on a reoccurring basis. The beauty in this is that the majority of people are also feeling that way. So you can normalize the feelings and move past them. So the goal is not to avoid feeling like an imposter, but to continue to progress in spite of those feelings or despite those feelings. So imposter syndrome can often lead to negative self-talk. So it's important to increase your awareness of how we're talking to ourselves. And we're having an internal dialogue all day long. So they're otherwise known as our thoughts. And I often ask myself, does this thought pattern serve me? Or does this thought help or hinder me? If it hinders me, then I choose to think of the situation differently in order to better support my well-being. This is what we call reframing. So this kind of circles back to the common theme throughout today's kind of interview, in that perception is reality, and we get to control how we perceive things. And so ultimately, we get to create our reality because we get to dictate our perceptions. And this is the most powerful and impactful shift in our thinking that we can make. I think the key takeaways could be summarized as follows. So one, you are not alone. So the more you can normalize your challenges, the more effective you will be at tackling them, because they don't seem as insurmountable if everybody's experiencing them, right? The next is be aware of your thoughts. Are they helping you or hindering you? So increasing your self-awareness can really help you throughout your day in really kind of taking note of what you're feeling, what you're thinking. The next is you are in control of the way you perceive the world. And remember that. Nobody can take that away from you. So if you're not cognizant of how you're perceiving something, take note, check in, and see, is something dictating the way that I perceive it? Is something kind of affecting my bias and my lens in the way that I view the world? And guess what? You can easily change it. Mm-hmm. The next is ask for help when you need it. Be aware of and use the resources that are at your disposal. As a TTU student, you have countless resources that you're paying for and that are incredibly valuable to you. And we'll show a slide later at the end of this interview where we'll talk about a few of those resources. And then lastly, take action, even when you're not 100% confident. A quote I'm often reminded of when I think about making decisions is, if you can't beat the fear, do it scared. Now, this isn't, a black and white philosophy to apply to everything, but in most cases, our fear is not going to go away, so we might as well just do it a little scared. And the more we do it, the less we fear it, and the less anxiety-provoking it'll be.
Oh, this is great. I feel like I'm already seeing things, assessing things in my own life and my own experiences a little differently after hearing these tips, kind of also delving into how to make your decisions, how to make them easier, honestly, and how to maybe just kind of go ahead, move forward without overthinking it for ourselves. So thank you so much, Dr. Winkelman. This is really great. We hope this has been helpful for our students. And to help anybody who's watching, I also want to bring up some resources that are very helpful. So if you would like to talk a little bit about your pre-health path with your assigned academic advisor under the Pre-Professional Health Careers Office, you can also take a picture of this page because it has some useful resources on it. We do have our website listed here. We do offer usually like a half-hour advising appointment with our students to talk through if you're on the pre-med path, if you're on, pre-dental, whatever area, we have some information for you. Also, the Student Counseling Services Office, I think it's really important to have a balanced, happy self before you're going forward and doing all of these things that are asked of you. And so I think it's really important to seek out counseling. If you feel like you have things on an emotional level that you wish to cover with a licensed professional, that is really important to go and take care of that. I have a lot of students who maybe just really struggle with that transition to come to college, or are struggling with lots of other things going on, maybe personal or family relationships. There is a 24-hour crisis line if anybody ever did kind of feel escalated, or if you have a friend, unfortunately, who this might happen to, it's important to get them some help. And so I am putting that up here as well. We have the Career Center, and this is an amazing resource for going to get help. They have career counseling staff that would help you, sit down with you, reviewing your resume, also planning out, how to go about seeking internships for summers or upcoming semesters. They have amazing program events throughout the year, kind of like job searching for introverts, networking, even help you in obtaining some professional career apparel at a discounted amount. So please seek out the Career Center. I'm always telling my students to go there. And then the Learning Center. So this is a good place if you're struggling with an academic challenge that you can't really overcome right now. I welcome you to look up the Learning Center. That is our on-campus tutoring center for getting help and start with some resources to help you, especially if you are in some of those more rigorous sciences that have, are pretty challenging and difficult. And then talking to your academic advisor as well, kind of combined with that, getting some help. So those are our topics. That's hopefully we've given you some problem solving 101 tips. Again, thank you for sitting through this, and we hope to connect with you pretty soon. So thank you again. Take care.